Our lesson today is the temple, the ark, the glory of God. That's what we're going to be discussing today. Today we're studying the account of the grand worship service held at the dedication of the completed temple. Of course, the Bible records the importance of worship services rather than construction of a temple. In other words, it's important, but the worship is more important than what construction of building the temple. Because you can get so involved in that you forget other things. Like I said, God is more concerned about our worship than He is about completing a building project. The temple is only a building, but it was dedicated as a place of worship for God. Today our churches are only buildings, but have been dedicated as a place to worship God. In other words, we are the church, not the building. This is just a place where we meet. Solomon scheduled the dedication of the temple to coincide with the Feast of Tabernacles, and that's a Jewish holiday that celebrates God's presence with the Israelites during their time in the wilderness. The dedication of the temple reminds Israel how far the Lord has brought them from slaves in Egypt to citizens of one of the strongest nations of its time. And our focus is in 2 Chronicles chapter 5. That's what we're going to be in today. And verse 1, thus all the work that Solomon made for the house of the Lord was finished. Solomon brought in all the things that David his father had dedicated, and the silver and the gold and all the instruments put he among the treasures of the house of God. First of all, the treasures that David had declared to the temple were brought. Some of the gold and silver collected by David was used in construction of the temple. Because of the massive amount of gold and silver that was left over, it was used for the upkeep of the temple and to pay the Levites for their temple service. In other words, I couldn't imagine having that much in gold and silver left over, and then they're using it for the upkeep of the temple. And in verse 2 of chapter 5, 2 Chronicles, then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto Jerusalem, to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the city of David, which is Zion. Next, the ark of the covenant was brought into the temple. Physically, it was no more than a wooden box overlaid with gold and covered with decorative designs and important symbols. The importance of the ark is who it represented. It served as a symbol of God's presence with His people. That's what it was. It was the presence of God. That's where He dwelt among His people. Sadly, Israel did not always regard the ark as an important item as it was. We all know that. Sometimes they viewed it as a good luck charm or an idol. It was taken into battle. Many Israelites lost their lives, and it was captured by a pagan nation. After a period of time, the ark was finally moved to its permanent home. Inside the Holy of Holies in the temple which is in Jerusalem. And then 2 Samuel chapter 6 and verse 12. And it was told King David, saying, the Lord hath blessed the house of Obededom and all that pertaineth unto him because of the ark of God. So David went up and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obededom into the city of David with gladness. Now in verse 3, wherefore all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto the king in the feast which was in the 7th month. This event took place as what we know as around September, October today, in today's world. And then this was the Feast of Tabernacles, where all the Jewish men had to present themselves to the Lord at this time of the year. And in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 and verses 8, 9, and 10, Also at the same time Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation from the entering of Hamath unto the river of Egypt. And in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. And on the third and 20th day of the 7th month, he sent the people away into their tents, glad and merry in heart, for the goodness that the Lord had showed unto David, and to Solomon, and to Israel his people. And then I got 2 Chronicles verse 4 and 5. I got that going, those two together. All the elders of Israel came, and the Levites took up the ark, and they brought up the ark and the tabernacle of the congregation and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle. These did the priests and the Levites bring up. Solomon made sure only the priests
Maybe raise it a little bit.
Okay. 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 2 Chronicles chapter 5, verse 6. Also King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him before the ark sacrificed sheep and oxen which could not be told nor numbered for the multitude. As the ark was being moved, the Israelites were sacrificing sheep and oxen on the path ahead of it. They were continually sacrificing. Solomon and the Levites and the entire host of Israel saw this as a very important and glorious event. It kind of tells me there was so much sacrificing there that the brazen altar that they had made was so small that he couldn't use that. They had to do it outside of that. There's all the sacrificing of the sheep and oxen. Verse 7, and the priests brought in the ark of the covenant of the Lord unto its place, to the oracle of the house, and to the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims. The oracles of God refers to the innermost sanctuary of the temple of the Holy of Holies, where God had commanded it to be placed. And I've got verses 8 and 9 going together. For the cherubim spread forth their wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubims covered the ark, and the staves thereof above. And they drew out the staves of the ark, that the ends of the staves were seen from the ark before the oracles, but they were not seen without. And there it is unto this day. Now that doesn't mean that it's still there in the 21st century. That was what they terminated back in that time, that it was still there. But that doesn't mean it's still there today. And the cherubims were built out of olive wood and overlaid with gold. These staves were used to transport the ark. These poles were approximately 15 feet long, and they filled out the 15 feet wide space of the Holy of Holies. Men were not allowed to touch the ark. That's why the poles were used, because as we go back, no one was allowed to touch it, so they had to use the poles, and the priests are the ones that had to carry it. And 1 Kings 8:8, and they drew out the staves, that the ends of the staves were seen out of the holy place before the oracle, and they were not seen without, and there they are again unto this day. And I just read that. And then that, like I said, doesn't mean that they're still there today in the 21st century. I have verse 10. There was nothing in the ark save the two tablets of stone which Moses put therein at Horeb, when the Lord made a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of Egypt. Originally, there were 3 items placed inside the Ark of the Covenant: Aaron's rod that budded, a pot of manna, and the tablets of stone. So at one time there was 3 items that were in the Ark. And in Exodus 16:33, and Moses said unto Aaron, take a pot, put in an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before the Lord to be kept for your generations. And then as the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron laid up before the testimony to be kept. In Hebrews 9, chapter 9 and verse 4, which had the golden censer and the ark of the covenant overlaid round about with gold, wherein was the gold pot of manna, and the Aaron's rod that budded, and the tablets of stone. Sometime between Moses and Solomon, 2 of the items were removed. Some say maybe they were removed by the Philistines when they captured the ark during the battle of Ebenezer. Another idea is that God miraculously removed them in order to highlight the importance of the stone tablets. The Ark of the Covenant is all that remains from the time Moses and all the other furnishings were Moses and all the other words, the Ark was the only original thing that was left. The other furnishings were reconstructed, indicating the holiness of the Ark. Regardless, all that is known is the 2 tablets of stone that Moses put in at Horeb is all that could be found inside at that time. So really not sure how the other 2 items got removed. God could have miraculously removed them, or when the Philistines captured the ark, they could have took them out. But nobody really knows. In verse 11, and it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, for all the priests that were present were sanctified. In other words, all that were found were sanctified, and did not then wait by course. This moment illustrates not merely the ritual, but also the fulfillment of God's promises to the Israelites. As recorded in 2 Chronicles 5:11, the priest's sanctification and the awe-inspiring glory of God filling the temple was emphasized, that worship should be characterized by purity and unison. And in verse 12, also the Levites, which were the singers, all of them of Asaph and Heman of Jeduthun, with their sons and their brethren, being arrayed in white linen, having cymbals and psalteries and harps, stood at the east end of the altar, and with them 120 priests sounding with trumpets. This verse here describes the scene during the dedication of the temple built by King Solomon. The Levite singers, including Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, and their families, are mentioned as being prepared for the service. These musicians are described as being dressed in fine linen, playing instruments like the cymbals, harps, and lyres. And also 120 priests are also mentioned, that they are described as sounding trumpets. The musicians and priests are positioned on the east side of that altar, ready to begin the service. So they're all in place, ready to begin. And that tells me, I've heard some churches don't allow music within their church. Here, this talks about music, playing instruments, and singing. So I believe with what God says, it's allowed in churches. Verse 13, it came even to pass, as the trumpeters and the singers were as one, to make one sound to be heard in praising and making the Lord. And when they lifted up their voices with trumpets and cymbals and instruments of music, and praised the Lord, saying, For he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. That then the house was filled with a cloud, even the house of the Lord. They were singing praises to God in unison, delivering a song of thanksgiving. The word they are saying is, He is good, and His mercy endures forever. Here, God is good all the time. Not just when things are going good. He's even good when we have circumstances in our life, things are not going well. God is still good. And so, it's not based on what our circumstances are, whether He's good or not. He's good all the time, period. His mercy, God's mercy is not something that's here today and gone tomorrow. His mercy continues regardless of the sins and flaws of His children. Boy, am I thankful for that. God's mercy is, for me, for everybody, it doesn't, it's there today and it's there forever. It's not just something, it's here today and it's gone tomorrow. I'm thankful that it's there all the time because I need His mercy. Now, verse 14. So that the priest could not stand to minister by the reason of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of God. The glory of the Lord that filled God's house, this is the Shekinah glory. The Shekinah glory is derived from the Hebrew word Shekinah, meaning to dwell. In other words, this refers to the visible manifestation of God's presence and glory, often depicted as a cloud or a pillar of fire, and the cloud in the Old Testament. And then I've got 1 Kings 8, verse 11. So that the priest could not stand to minister because the cloud for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord. So His cloud was so, awe-inspiring that they couldn't continue ministering there because God's presence was there. Okay, that was a short chapter, so I don't have anything else to add to that. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to share? Brother Hess?
Probably the thing that I see that's emphasized considerably towards the end of this is the fact of why people were called together.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think we need to ask ourselves, why are we called together here?
Right, why are we here?
Is God really present with us? He should be.
Yeah, He should be.
And that's what we should be doing while we're together. It's nice to have fun together, but when it's time for the service to begin, that's when it's time to realize now we're here.
Yeah.
That aspect is...
It's time to get serious now. We're here to worship.
And that's one of the things in our church. We do have fun.
Mm-hmm.
But we also need that serious thing, and I believe we have that here a great bit also. But that's the thing we have to remember, is why are we here? It's not what we have, in our building. We could do without it. The church I pastored in Arkansas, when you walked across the floor, you could hear yourself walking across the floor. The building was about ready to cave in. We had a heat burner right in front of the pulpit. The only one that got the heat was the one that was up in the pulpit. He was sweating to death. Everybody else was freezing to death.
Yeah.
But we had the worship spirit, and that's what we have to realize. We don't have to spend money.
No.
All we have to do is look to God, and allow Him to use us in order to bring about what He wants to do.
I was reading these series of chapters that we're covering, and one thing I noticed is God stresses the importance of obedience, and He says, if you will do this, then I will do this. It was the theme all the way through. I read it was being obedient. If we are not obedient, God's going to forsake us and cast us out, basically. He's not going to be with us. So it stresses the importance of being obedient to God in whatever we're doing. Is anyone else? Okay, if we don't have other comments, Larry, could you close in prayer, please?